Here we are, the long-anticipated opening visual of the Enterprise, a thematically and emotionally relevant song playing, and we're back home. Star Trek Picard, though undoubtedly a very different and new show, is undeniably also a sequel. And with all sequels, well, you know what they say. While the focus of this guide is not a comparison between the two series, it's impossible to talk about Picard without also talking about its mother show, Star Trek The Next Generation. Its storylines, its lore, general impact, and the anticipation that this sequel ensued. Star Trek The Next Generation aired from 1987 to 1994, and it was itself also a sequel show to Star Trek the original series. We could sit here and talk about the whole Trek family tree, but I digress. The series follows the crew of the Enterprise D, and specifically its captain, Jean-Luc Picard. It was episodic, and it followed an ensemble crew traveling the stars and continuing the mission to explore strange new worlds and make peaceful contact with new life. The series is on numerous lists spanning decades of greatest shows. It's won a number of awards, and for its time became the most successfully syndicated show, having been Emmy nominated for Best Dramatic Series in 1994. Suffice to say, the show's popular. Very popular. And it's not just the show itself. Jean-Luc Picard has gone down as a pop culture icon, and for fans, a very important character. And it seemed that once the final film, yes, they made a couple movies after the show ended, we wouldn't see the character of Picard on screen again. Sir Patrick Stewart himself was always very against reviving the character for any kind of reboot, that Picard's story had been told. So lo and behold, when Sir Patrick Stewart takes the stage at a Star Trek convention and announces that he will in fact be returning to the character, people were understandably excited.
Jean-Luc Picard is back.
As they should be. This isn't a review, and my focus is not going to be about other people's reception to the show. It's not meant as a summary either. What I'm interested in is exploring the myth and meaning behind what the show is trying to tell us. Star Trek as an entire series has always been a form of meaningful storytelling. They want to tell us something with their stories, usually as a reflection of humanity in some way. It's also expanding in its universe. And considering Sir Patrick was so protective over the character for so long, the people involved must be pretty confident in what they want to say with their story. This guide is meant as a kind of deep dive into who our space Shakespearean captain has become, and what the future is trying to tell us about ourselves. However, I'm but one gentle fan with their interpretations, and if this is something you're up for, I invite you along for the ride with me. Now, we open on the Enterprise, and I stress again how much of a sequel show this has to be in the first episode. And for that reason, we're going to get an immense amount of lore, history, and character catch-ups, with just the right amount of callbacks to the original story to be dropped right away. Picard and Data are playing poker in 10 Forward, with Blue Skies playing in the background. All throwbacks. Blue Skies having been the song Data sang in the last movie we saw them both in, Nemesis, at Troy and Riker's wedding. Data, a main character on Star Trek The Next Generation, an android of extreme sentience who served for years until he sacrificed himself to save Picard's life at the end of Nemesis. The obvious dream continues like bliss, and not just for Picard, but also us, all the old fans. They go all in, and Data lays 5 Queen of Hearts. Mars appears outside, and with a confused Picard, Data disappears, and we see the atmosphere light up and start to burn. When he wakes up, he's at his chateau in France. We jump to Boston, and we meet Daj and her Zahian boyfriend Kaler having a date night to celebrate her getting into the Daystrom Institute for a fellowship in
artificial intelligence and quantum consciousness.
If that isn't a mouthful. While they share some wine, flowers sprouting on the table, they're interrupted suddenly, and Kaler is killed instantly. The intruders grab Daj, hook some kind of device to her. When they cover her head in a hood, the time slows and she blocks their knockout blow. Daj fights back, almost anticipating their moves, while the mysterious people exclaim she is now activating. She promptly kills them and remains utterly confused, upset, and terrified. Before she can grasp what's happening, she gets some kind of vision of Picard, and we're in. After the opening, we get a beautiful aerial shot of Chateau Picard, the stretching vineyards, the rolling hills, in a lot of ways heavenly. Picard seems settled, retired. He has a dog, for Q's sake, who's a good boy and is aptly named Number 1. We meet Laris and Jabon, 2 Romulans who seem to live with and work for Picard at the chateau. While taking care of him, they seem to have a very trusting relationship, and there's this obvious history there that oozes in their interactions. Picard alludes to an interview, and the cameraman roll in. Now, this scene is the majority of the history catch-up time, and we'll go through the lore together. An interview is a pretty good way the writers use to explain the past, and we quickly learn the occasion for the interview is the anniversary of the Romulan supernova, a connection to the Trek cinematic universe. The interviewer eggs him on until she asks exactly what he doesn't want to be asked, why he left Starfleet. He cracks, and it's explained Picard left his service on the Enterprise in order to command a rescue armada of 10,000 capable warp ships in order to relocate 900 million Romulans before the supernova destroyed their world. On top of that, the shipyards and the entire armada was hacked by rogue synthetic androids, killing all the residents and igniting the skies of Mars, which is still on fire. This leads to the Federation banning synthetic life forms and abandoning the rescue plan, to which Picard plainly thinks was a mistake. And somewhere on a rainy street, Dahj sees Picard on a TV screen and knows exactly where to find the man in her vision. Okay, so here's the lore drop. In the last 20 years, the 2 most major changes are the Romulan supernova and the synthetic ban, both of which relate to Picard's past and the world we know in different ways, but both are intertwined indefinitely. One exists because of the other. Without the need for the Armada, the Mars disaster would never have happened, and there'd be no reasoning for a synth ban at all. We have some understanding of Picard's love and faith in Data, a synthetic, and we know that he has a past with synthetic life forms, which we'll dive into more depth as we go. And we've also seen Romulans, whether you knew it or not. Romulans in the previous series have been a major opponent of Starfleet and the Federation. They're a secretive and technologically advanced race who are distantly related to Vulcans. That gives us some idea as to where Laris and Jabon are from. Refugees of some kind, their worlds destroyed. And by their relationship with Picard, he obviously played a big part in that. But for the Federation to spend their immense resources on an enemy's safety would have been a highly contested issue, understandably. But who are we to decide the fate of another, if we can play a role in helping? What are the values that Starfleet holds itself by? To help those who can't help themselves, to explore peacefully, to better yourself. One could probably argue Picard held those ideals of Starfleet as his faith. He very obviously feels betrayed and hurt by Starfleet, and also a lot of shame, or else why would he so badly not want to be asked about it? As one of my favorite characters from another show puts it,
"You must let go of your feelings of shame if you want your anger to go away. Pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame."
His pride of Starfleet and his own achievements have clouded his mind in the shame of his failures. It isn't until we hit our lowest points that we're open to the greatest change. Deep emotional change has happened to Picard. He's not the same hopeful person that we knew. Picard likens the rescue armada to Dunkirk, and dropping a history reference is never a mistake in Star Trek. It reminds me of the title of the episode. Remembrance Day is the memorial day for Commonwealth states to acknowledge and give thanks to those who died in the line of battle, specifically the World Wars. Dunkirk was a battle and a rescue mission during World War II. The Nazis were closing in on Allied soldiers on a coast in France, trapping them in the corner and hoping the attack would win the war for them. The Allied forces created an impossible evacuation plan, using varying vessels from Navy ships to fishing boats to get the people safely across the water, in the end saving 338,000 men from the coast. Since then, the miracle at Dunkirk is considered a major turning point in the eventual victory of the Allies. The loss of war plays a part in the lives of everyone, and in our history. Soldiers and civilians alike suffer at the cost of war, all differently, but all greatly.
And it was not so easy for those who were left behind.
People like Jabon and Laris, who remember who Picard is and what he's done, who he saved despite them being Romulan, and the love between them. I think it's a wonderful little detail to make Laris and Jabon Romulan, that the closest people in Picard's life happen to be the people we thought of as enemies. And Picard makes that point, that a life, no matter whose it is still a life, and that saving others should always be the mission of Starfleet, not a world of othering and fear. And I think forgetting our own history threatens the present more than the future ever does. Picard is lounging with a glass of wine when Dahj approaches. She opens up to Picard that it was instinct to fight back, and the same instinct brought her to him, that she feels safe with him, and he welcomes her in. Picard asks about her necklace, and she explains her father made it for her. They contemplate their strange familiarity, that Dahj has some kind of old connection to him, that she knows him, and not because of his Starfleet legacy. They establish a kind of trust. Picard is dreaming again. He looks out the window like he does every morning, but in the vineyards he sees Data. Approaching him, Data's painting. We see a faceless person standing by a crashing ocean, and Data asks Picard if he'd like to finish it, and he wakes. Like Data is giving him clues in his dreams, Picard sees the same painting hanging above his head. But Dahj disappeared and ran away with no trace. Picard leaves for San Francisco to Starfleet Archive to visit his own vault. Picard's archive is a great little bit into himself. We see models of all his ships, from the Stargazer to the yacht Cousteau from the film Insurrection. We see a Klingon Batleth, a complete works of Shakespeare, and of course the banner from Captain Picard Day signed by every child on the Enterprise D. Picard, the man who in the pilot episode of TNG explicitly states how much he dislikes children, who keeps a memory of, at the time, something he dreaded but now has great value to him, enough to be a part of his sealed history. He searches the archive and finds a painting, one that matches the previous but this time has a face and it looks remarkably like Dahj. He asks the index about it and we learn it's made by Commander Data and is titled Daughter, and Picard realizes just who Dahj might be. All the while, Dahj is calling her mother, and it activates something in Dahj's mind, and she deep dives the futuristic webs to locate him. Still confused, he sits her down to explain his theory. He introduces Data, and her immediate answer is like
the ones who attacked Mars?
This feels kind of weird to me, considering Dahj is supposedly a genius and
Artificial intelligence and quantum consciousness.
yet somehow doesn't know who Data is, or possesses a more nuanced attitude to synthetic life.
I'm a soulless murder machine?
I know it's supposed to show a bias that's been built into society now because of the ban, but coming from Dahj, it just didn't hit right for me, but I'll play along with them. The point of the conversation is Picard is expressing his debt and gratitude to Data, that he owes him his life, that it logically could be some kind of wake-up in her subconscious. Dahj emotionally recites her history.
No, I was born in Seattle. My dad was a xenobotanist. He spliced two genuses, and he named the offspring after me, Orchidaceae, Dahj, Oncidium, yellow and pink.
She equates being a machine to being, quote, not real, and Picard makes it quick to be known that she is incredibly important and dear to him, that she was made intentionally and with a deep amount of love, and that he will help her no matter what. Interrupted, Dahj knows the attackers have found them and starts to run. Bringing them to the top of a building, there she uses her android superpowers to fight back, one of them losing their helmets and being revealed to be Romulan. One of the agents spits some kind of acid on him and Dahj, though. She disintegrates and she explodes, dying and throwing Picard back and out. He wakes up with Lars and Jabon at the chateau, and he tells them what he's learned. Picard then declares his guilt, that he's been wasting away in hiding, and that his defeat has taken his will to live. But he's tired of his own pity party, that Dahj deserved better from him, and so does the rest of the world, and he's off. The Daystrom Institute, the place where we know Dahj was just accepted, and also historically the Federation's division of robotic research, is where Picard meets Agnes Jurati, Earth's leading expert in artificial intelligence, who he immediately asks,
You can tell me if it is possible to make a sentient android out of flesh and blood.
No, really, how can I?
She shows him her old research and experiments. The synthetic androids that attacked Mars originated from her lab. Jurati mentions she worked closely with a Bruce Maddox, who we met way back in Season 2 of TNG, when he tried to force Data against his will and to be experimented on, wherein Data fought for his right to choose. The episode, Measure of a Man, is one that's pretty integral to the conversation of the series, and also just happens to be a great episode of television. Picard challenges the ruling that Data's Starfleet property, and defends him against Maddox, winning in the end, but through questions like, what does it mean to be alive? What is sentience? And do we have souls? What are souls? Questions that can't fully be answered ever, that philosophy being some of the biggest in human history. But it's not our right or decision to rule ourselves over something else's agency and self-fulfillment, no matter if we created it. Picard takes a lot of responsibility for Data, almost as a father might. Maddox was a little bit of a pompous asshole in the episode, though by the end he seemed to even question his own beliefs, and he can't fully understand what Data truly is, but starts to respect him as an individual. It's even mentioned in later episodes that the two are staying in touch, working together. But similar to Maddox's theory back then, any new advanced synth would need to be created from Data. And when Picard shows Jurati Dahj's necklace, she seems to catch her breath. She knows what it is and explains fractal neuronic cloning, that one part of Data could be spliced into new life, split in two, pairs, twins, just like the new flower genus split in two by her father. And we know she has a twin sister. Finally, we jump to a Romulan warbird, coming into what's called the reclamation site. The distinct green of the Romulan ship radiates, and we see a broody hot Romulan guy emerge from the smoke and call out to someone. So we meet Narek and Soji. She's playing with the same necklace Dahj wore, and Narek, seemingly an innocent soft boy, drops his baggage and mentions her helping broken people all day. And she joins him. Which is when we get our epic outro, the long pullback of tech after tech showing the colossal size of the place, until it's totally zoomed out. A frickin' Borg cube. What an ending. Romulans and Borg and synth, oh my. Where to begin? There's a lot stuffed into this episode to set up the journey Picard is about to go on, and we haven't even met half the main characters yet, so let's not jump too ahead. But it is here to set up where we're going, and every detail's there deliberately. So who is Picard? It's been 20 years since we've last seen him, and he's living a life of extreme luxury, retired in the countryside with a legacy of gold. But what we see is a Picard who's merely existing, someone who would rather be dreaming than wake up, melancholic and angry. But he's still Picard, and he's still strong in his belief for what's right and for others, caring and trustworthy. When he learns the identity of Dahj and his relation to her, he immediately feels responsibility. She's a part of Data, and he has something to believe in again. I think it's not a stretch to say this series has a lot to do with the relationship between Picard and Data, and how that's influenced Picard as a person. And that's a pretty good driving point considering the last time we saw them was Data sacrificing his life for Picard in Nemesis. Picard and Data have a relationship that was some of the most defining moments in each other's lives. In a lot of ways, Picard was a father figure to Data. Parenthood's always been playing a role in their relationship. Now, let's remember, Data having a daughter is not a totally new occurrence. In the brilliant episode of TNG titled The Offspring, just like how Dahj refers to the flower her father named after her, Data uses his own neural net to create a new android, Lal, whom he takes on the responsibility of being the parent of, teaching her how to function and live among people. It's a beautiful episode, and if you haven't seen TNG, I highly recommend a watch. Pointed out in the episode, Lal is a name meaning beloved, deriving from a Sanskrit word chosen by Data deliberately. So it's not far off to think that maybe another one of Data's daughters might have a significant namesake. There's a close word to Dahj in Sanskrit, meaning dowry, which could sound strange, but there's another little connection. Right before Picard met Dahj, he recited a Shakespeare line, "There's no legacy as rich as honesty." This quote's from the Shakespeare play All's Well That Ends Well, and Picard recites it to number one, rhetorically asking him who said it. It seems to, at face value, fit this particular moment. Picard has an enormous legacy, and he's continually building on it, including having a disaster interview where he loses his temper, but at least he was honest to his beliefs. The original context of the quote is much different, however. The line is spoken to the character Diana, who later in the story lies to and deceives a married man who's pursuing her for her virginity, in order for her to acquire more money for her own dowry, so she can marry better off herself. Honesty here, historically, refers in actuality to a woman's virginity, and legacy being money in a legal contract, or a dowry, her name Diana also being a reference to the Roman goddess of virginity and the hunt. It's a pun, and it's an incredibly layered one, not for the characters, but for the audience. Data and Picard read Shakespeare together, and one of Data's most prized possessions was the copy of his complete works gifted to him by Picard, and has been a significant theme in TNG in the past. It speaks to Dahj's existence also having a double meaning, quite literally. Whether it's intentional or not, I think it's a neat little detail. And as Picard asks number one, Dahj approaches, and number one speeds over to her. Dowry, the transference of wealth, and Dahj brings Picard the equal gift and burden of her mystery. While she brings danger, she also brings incredible meaning to him. There was some imagery also making some appearances. Her necklace, a symbol for fractal neuronic cloning, also happens to look like a cell splitting in two. They resemble two wedding rings a little bit too, which may be another reference to dowry, but I'm probably reaching. We got references to flowers in relation to Daj and Soji. Flowers in general tend to pop up a couple times. Maybe they're important. After Picard loses Daj, he realizes living in the past is just as dangerous as forgetting it. His real crime's not trying to be better, to make a change, and instead has been wallowing in his failures. Picard has without a doubt lost his drive to live. As he puts it,
I haven't been living. I've been waiting to die.
he retreated when he hit his lowest point, and has been miserably hovering at the end of his life, not living to his full potential, losing his faith, and giving up on the mission. When Daj presents him with new purpose, he's fast to take it, not just because she's dear to him, but because it's the right thing to do. That's pretty reminiscent of the man we knew, especially because of his relationship with Data. Daj, much like Data, is his family. Bringing his life new purpose through love, in some ways is like Data giving Picard back his life a second time. I think a lot of Picard's journey is a reminder that there's no perfect ending. His life didn't stop after Nemesis, and the world didn't stop either. He went through some life-altering experiences with his faith and his optimism of the world. And after Data's death, much like all death, the planets keep spinning, and time keeps passing, and other people's lives continue. But just because Data's life ended, Picard's doesn't have to either, and he chooses not to let it. He just needs a little reminder of who he is. We've barely put our toes in the water, but Remembrance gives us a look into where the universe we hadn't seen this far into is, and what's different. It's introduced us to the man Picard is today, and who he might try to become while the show continues. A couple things we've yet to even dive into. Remembering isn't always easy. Remembrance of the hard and the difficult, the loved and the lost, the nostalgia and the home. But living in the past is just as risky, and accepting what has changed is the only way forward. To pick up the pieces after feeling the weight of your guilt and sorrows take the will out of your life. But forward is the only way.
Never saw the sun shining so bright. Never saw things going so right. Noticing the days hurrying by. When you're in love, my how they fly. Oh, blue skies